So I served from 2008 January to 2010, and it was a few years ago now, but and it's split since then. And at the time, it included Stockton and actually south of Stockton down to Manteca and another city, Tracy, down there. And it went up north to Sacramento, of course. Didn't go into Roseville at all, as it never has, but or at least not while I was there. And then it went northeast into the hills, up into El Dorado Hills and beyond, beyond that up to Georgetown. And so it was a lot more encompassing now. I think it's a lot of those areas kind of reside in 3 or 4 different missions now. And so it's split up quite a bit. But yeah, there's a lot of great places to go. I remember I actually never went to see big trees, but that was one place a lot of missionaries like to go. There are these huge trees that are tall, really tall and really thick trunks. And there's a great place, Old Town Sacramento, which is just downtown, and you can go visit some of the old historical kind of cultural places and get a feel for that there. There's some fun sites and attractions there as well. Sacramento area is really diverse, and that's one thing I learned right away is you step out onto the streets and one person after the other, next person you talk to is a different culture, a different ethnicity, a different language, and from a different country. And it's amazing because you get to talk to people from all over the world. And it's funny because for me it was an English-speaking mission here in the States, but in many ways I felt like I was on a foreign mission, at least throughout certain points or certain days. I'd find myself in homes all day of people of different cultures, and it was really cool. For one, we had a number of Tongan wards, and we didn't have any Tongan-speaking missionaries, but we did have missionaries that served in those wards, and so that was their full-time stewardship. We also had a number of other cultures as far as programs, so we had a good number of Spanish-speaking missionaries and missionaries that were called to serve in Spanish. We had missionaries that were called to serve in Cambodian and Hmong, as well as Laotian. And we also had a lot of Marshallese people and people from Kiribati, which are smaller Pacific islands kind of out in the same general area as a little north of Tonga. And we eventually started an area Marshallese speaking as well. And I had the privilege of being companions with 2 elders from that part of the Pacific, and they were fantastic missionaries. And there's a lot of non-members in Sacramento that are Marshallese and from that general area. And I also found that there were a lot of people from other parts of the world that we didn't have programs for, like I'd run into people all the time from the Philippines, from Vietnam, from other Asian countries, from the Middle East area, Pakistan, India, really just all kinds of different areas and cultures all around Sacramento. So it's a great opportunity to spread yourself out and get to know so many different cultures. The church is pretty big in Sacramento area, and I didn't really go out and serve in any of the country parts. I was mostly in kind of the more populated areas, and the wards in the populated areas were pretty full wards. I mean, much like a ward you'd see in any other part of the states, in Utah or elsewhere, and we'd always have, a good few hundred people there, 200 to 300 people, and there were about, I think, 11 stakes in the mission at the time that I served, and we had split each stake into its own zone. And so the zones were divided up strictly by stake, and we didn't have language zones, so English missionaries and Spanish missionaries would be in the same zone if they were in the same stake. Typically, I think there were a few exceptions to that occasionally, but that's often how it was organized. And yeah, through the 11 stakes that were in the mission, again, most of them had well-populated meetings down at the ward level. There's a lot of history there as far as the gold rush and people coming down for that, and that is one thing that I believe was a part of what led some saints out there in the early history of the state. It's difficult to compare missions because I didn't really serve in any of the other missions in California, but while we're there, of course, missionaries have pride in their own mission, right? And so we were always told the Sacramento mission was the best mission in California, and we believed that, and we acted like it was. I have no idea. I don't think there's really a best mission, but it was fantastic. And I know at one point in the last couple of decades, it was the highest baptizing mission in California. But that fluctuates and changes all the time, and it's just really the missionaries and the mission president and the area and what that's going through that influences that, I think. So the amount of lessons that you teach a week really varied on the area you were in and also the language or the program you were in, which is very interesting. But for example, in the Marshallese program that started up about halfway through my mission, the Marshallese people are very willing to set appointments with you. And those missionaries that served in that area would teach probably at least 20 lessons a week. And they would sometimes go above that, and they would literally have appointment after appointment after appointment every day and wouldn't have any time to tract. They would still street contact, but there wasn't a lot of finding for them. They would just constantly be teaching. And in English areas, it depended on really what kind of area you're in. If you're in an affluent area, it was very common to have fewer lessons than if you were in a lower income area. And a big part of that, I think, was because our mission was a very street contact heavy mission. And we were very focused on street contacting. We would talk with every person we saw throughout our daily schedule. We would always stop and talk to them. And in affluent areas, people often leave for work. They're not really outside on the street as much. You might catch them on the weekends doing yard work, but it was a lot harder to, by your own contacting efforts, really find people to teach. And so in those areas, you may have 5 to 15 lessons a week, just depending. In some of the lower income areas, it was easier to get more like 10 to 20 appointments in a week. But even then, you still have to push yourself. And all missionaries have to push themselves to, no matter what area you're in, to get the number of appointments that you'd have. But yeah, you can teach a lot in Sacramento.